In this video, we're going to talk about static variables and methods. Now, you've seen the keyword static before. You may recall in our very first program, and in fact in every program since, we've had something that said public static void main, making the main method a static method. But we haven't really talked about what it meant. Let's take care of that right now. You can have both static methods and variables. Now, if you don't specify them as static, the default is not to be static, then a variable or a method within a class is associated with each object instantiated as a member of that class. So, for example, in checking account, we had an int that was called numTrans, number of transactions. Every object that we created that was of type checking account had a copy of numTrans that was separate from every other object's numTrans. In other words, we might say checking account account 1, and we might say checking account account 2. Account 1 has a copy of numTrans, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the numTrans that account 2 has. One of them might have 7 transactions, the other might have 4 transactions. One might reset it to 0, the other might not have reset it to 0 yet. Each object would have the entire template from the class and have their own version of all the non-static variables in it. Similarly, they each had a method called deposit, meaning we couldn't invoke the deposit method without first having an object of type checking account and then telling that object to deposit something. So we might have had code like this in a main method or in bank runner in your programming examples. Checking account check1. That means create me an object whose variable name is check1 that's of type checking account. And we will instantiate it by doing a new checking account, passing a name, number, and an amount to the constructor for checking account. Once we have that, we can start using our variable check1. So we might say check1, deposit $200. Hey, variable name check1, I know you're a checking account object. Go find your deposit method and pass it $200 and then do whatever the deposit method does. That's for non-static methods. Now, if we choose to make variables static, it means there's only one copy of them for the whole class, regardless of how many objects are created of that class. So let's think about that. One copy for all the objects of that class. So maybe a number of transactions that isn't separate from checking account 1 and checking account 2. It might be the overall number of transactions of all the checking accounts put together. Now, most of the time, that isn't what we want to do, but there are times when that makes sense. To do that, we would make the variable static. How do we do that? To declare a variable as static, we include the static keyword at the beginning of the declaration before the public, private, or protected keyword that we learned about in an earlier video. So let's look at the following statement. It means that there's exactly one copy of the variable that all objects of this class share. Static private int overall num transactions. That means each checking account doesn't have its own version of this. There's one for the whole class that all objects share. Now, why might we want to have done that? Suppose we wanted to track when we did our 1,000th transaction of the month, because after we do 1,000 transactions, the next person that does something wins a free gift card to a local restaurant as a promotion. Well, I don't want to know that Jane Doe has done 15 transactions. I want to know who's done the 1,000th transaction overall. In order to do that, I have to keep one variable for the entire class. Now, we can also make methods static by including the static keyword in the first line of the method. Public static int factorial. Public static void main, which you've already seen. Now, a static method can be invoked without having to instantiate an object of its class. The deposit method, which we created for checking account, was not static. That means I couldn't get anybody to deposit anything unless I already had a checking account created. And then I'd say, hey, you, checking account, deposit something into yourself. A static method can be invoked without ever instantiating an object of the class. That means a static method can't reference any class data that's not static. Now you should recognize this from our main methods. The main method, which was static, got executed even though we never had to create an object of type bank runner. We never had to create an object of type programming assignment 8, yet the method could still be executed. So this is a common way to implement a collection of utility routines, like in the math class. Some of you have already found math.power or math.absolute, or ABS for absolute, math.random to give you a random number. To invoke a static method in one class from somewhere in another class, you have to append the name of the class to the method name. Not the name of an object, the name of the class. So maybe I want to have a variable called absolute value that's an integer, and it's going to be math.abs. ABS is a static method in the math class. And I do math.abs, my number. Notice I don't have to create a variable of type math. I just have to say, hey math class, I know you've got this utility routine, let me run it.